All right. Hi there. My name is Jessica Crow. I am the founder of Apogy. We are a change leadership training, coaching, and consulting firm. And this year, 2022, we are hosting a series of interviews with change leaders and makers in our community. And I thought it'd be a lot of fun to start off our first interview with someone who is near and dear to my heart, my husband, Trevor. I got to watch him go through some major changes with his organization over the past couple of years. And I thought it would be a great case study, provide some lessons learned for people who are change practitioners, working on projects, helping with integration within an organization, or for internal employees who are leading change, whether or not they have the title of change manager or they are in a leadership or manager role and are being tasked with bringing on a new teammate, organizational restructuring, things along those lines. So Trevor, if you don't mind, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about Doida Crow Legal?
All right. Well, thanks for having me. I am honored to be on your first podcast here not podcast, your first interview, 2022. So, I started practicing law in 2009, and I practiced at a couple different firms in Denver before starting my own firm in 2018. And so I started my own firm. It was called Crow Legal at the time. I had just left a firm that I had made partner at. It was about a 40 attorney firm. And I really just wanted to kind of control my own destiny, create a boutique corporate transactional firm. But it was just me in the beginning. And so it was me in a small office in a co-working space, and was able to develop some clients and had some clients that came with me, and things kind of snowballed and just got busier and busier. And so the end of 2018, I ended up hiring one attorney to help me. And then in 2019, I hired another one. And so we were 3 attorneys and practiced that way until actually February of 2021, when I merged with another firm, a guy named Stan Doida, who had a similar firm. He has a very similar background, and he had practiced at other law firms and then started his own firm. And we just thought we would have a good firm together. So, joining forces with his firm, or joining our firms together, that it'd really be a 1 + 1 = 3 type scenario.
Yep. And I obviously was there for all of that and got to watch you in your journey of starting your firm and bringing on employees and then becoming Doida Crow Legal. And I know from talking with you, there were lots of really great moments and things that went really well. And there were also some moments of challenge and just learning. And so I wanted to ask you, what makes mergers and changes of ownership or organizational restructuring, what makes that difficult from your perspective and experience as someone who just recently went through that? What makes it hard let's actually start with the owners, for someone like you and Stan, who had your own practices and now you're coming together? Can you walk us through, anyone who's listening, through why those types of changes are challenging?
Yeah, I think it's just, there's so many things to think about and so many different areas that it's very hard for when I'm speaking from a law firm standpoint, because that's where my experience is. There's just so many items that we thought we may have talked about everything, but it's just, you can't talk about everything. And there's both big picture items like vision and things like that, and there's also smaller items like, what is your email service provider? How do you, what phone numbers are we going to use, and things like that. And so I think that piece is hard, but from an owner's perspective, I feel like it was easier in that a lot of that small stuff falls into place. As long as you have a vision, aligned vision, then a lot of the other things fall into place. So, we spent probably a year talking and going back and forth and hanging out and just having regular meetings to try to decide whether we were a good fit, whether we had the same kind of core values, we had the same aligned vision for the future of the firm, of a combined firm. And, after that long period of time, we figured we did. And we found out we both had ideas of creating the go-to business transactional firm in the Denver Rocky Mountain region. And we both thought, hey, we're going to have to grow to get there. and we can either grow organically by hiring other people, or we can maybe jumpstart that process by combining our firms together. And so that's what.
No, and that's, I think one of the things that stands out for me is that you and Stan had a lot of time to come to terms, to get settled with this idea of making this big change. But at the same time, I don't remember that you were having those same types of conversations at the same level with your employees, which is, in my experience, and maybe you can speak to this too, what often makes change like that more difficult for the employees. And you said yourself that it might have been easier in some ways for you and for Stan, because the other stuff falls into place. What does make it more challenging for the people who are impacted by what's happening with the merger and the integration of the two organizations? Can you speak to that?
Certainly. Yeah. So the employees, I mean, there's just so much more that they're thinking about than, well, I hate to say so much more that they're thinking about, but there's other items that they're thinking about. So in my mind, as long as we have aligned vision, all the small stuff will fall into place. And they're thinking, well, what is the new comp structure? What do the benefits look like? Where do I fit into this vision?
Right.
For the future, and those sort of things. And so that is one thing that I think is hard for employees that were along for the ride. And it's something that I honestly at the time didn't think through enough, and should have thought through a little bit more on how to communicate that to them and explain what that was going to look like. The problem is, a lot of times there's a lot of unknowns. We didn't know how it was going to work when we merged. We had an idea, we had a line, we realized we had an aligned vision, but we're kind of taking it step by step. After the merger, we just had to integrate and kind of figure it out as we go. So, it made it harder to communicate some of those things to everybody else. But certainly looking back at it, it's, having those conversations, there's things that I could have changed and done better as far as communicating, where exactly everyone else fits into the puzzle on this merger, or even if you don't have an answer, saying, hey, we don't have an answer to this, but this is kind of where we're thinking it's going to go.
Right.
Ways that number of things that could happen along the way.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's sort of, what you're describing is unique to your situation, but also universal in many ways, because no matter what type of change it is, whether it's an integration, a merger of sorts, or some sort of technical project, there's going to be things that come up that you just can't predict or think through in its entirety, and people are going to have those questions. And you talked about, or you mentioned some of the things that think you could have done better, and then some of the things, things that you did well. Can you share a few more things that you and Stan did well during the process? And then we can kind of come back to if there's any areas where you wish you'd really doubled down in terms of being more effective.
Mm-hmm. And I think I already mentioned it, but maybe it's worth repeating, is making sure we have the aligned vision. That's what we really did well. I think we spent time on that. And I think that, we knew going into it that there's going to be bumps along the road, and there was going to be, things that come up that we didn't talk about. But, if we all have the same end game, how we get there, it makes those answering those questions a lot easier, right? Does this help us become the go-to business transactional firm in the Rocky Mountain region? Yes or no? And if we have that as the underlying goal, then all the other stuff kind of can fit into place for the most part. So I think making sure we had aligned vision was the biggest thing that we spent time on and we did right. Was there other things to talk about, things that maybe we could have done better? Yeah,
maybe one or two more things. I mean, you mentioned communication, but that was challenging because you were figuring things out as you went along. Was there anything else where you were like, wow, I wish we would have done that a little bit differently? And if not, that's okay too. I mean, I think from, kind of watching everything play out as someone, if I were in your shoes, or if I were in the shoes of somebody who is consulting on this or working within the organization, I think your point about having a clear vision is a great takeaway for people who are watching this video and want to learn as they're getting assigned to projects or they are meeting with clients, that having that through line is going to be what carries people during the times where they, the peaks and valleys. But if there is any, and effective communications is something that is necessary throughout the process. But if there is something else that was top of mind for you during the experience, that would be a good takeaway for people who are going through a change of this sort, whether they are leading it as the owner, leading it as an employee, supporting the change. Any other kind of takeaways that you'd want to impress on people watching this video?
Yeah, I think communication is the number one thing, and really communication is such a big item to say, communication. But I think the aspects of communication were asking the right questions. It wasn't, hey, does this sound good to you, or does this, that, and getting a yes, which most people just said, yeah, okay, yeah, it sounds good, bigger firm, whatever, sounds good, and looking back now, there was unanswered questions that just didn't want to get brought up at the time, that somebody didn't want to ask at the time potentially. And so it's really digging in and asking those follow-on questions and being proactive about, explaining the plan and the process as it relates to each individual on the team, and making sure that they understand, what the role is going to be moving forward, what the expectations are, what it's going to look like from every aspect of their new job. I mean, change is hard for people, and going from, one place to a new place, which really it was the same me, but now there was all, more attorneys, more staff that everybody had to deal with. There's different styles that people have, and kind of, I think, communicating that a little bit better, asking additional questions, and then also anticipating some of the issues a little bit better would have been something that I would, if I could go back and do it again, I would have changed.
Those are really great takeaways. One thing you said gave me another question, and it is related to the messaging and the questions that you ask. Now, there's in the workplace today, there are 5 generations of employees, and I think your firm reflects that as well. Do you believe that the different for employees who are at different phases in their career or life experiences, do they need different messaging? Do they need different questions answered, or is it enough to have sort of a general bucket of things you can respond to? I mean, do you think there's you need to adjust depending on the group that you're, or the role that you are working with in the moment?
Certainly. Yeah. And I think that goes back, good questions too, to find out. I think, generationally, that's probably true. And then also just individually, it's true.
Mm-hmm.
He has different things that they're worried about or they care about or whatever. For one person, it may be, what's the remote policy? Can I work from home? I really like doing that a couple of days a week. Is that something that's something that's important to me? Other people, it might be, how do I become a partner here? What do I need to do to become a partner, and what is my trajectory? Is that laid out, and is there a clear plan for that, or is it just whenever you guys decide type thing? And so, all that, and then how many billable hours are you expecting? Everybody has their own sort of thing that they're worried about or maybe concerned about, and so, it's really kind of figuring that out. I do think from a generational standpoint, just, if we're going to paint in with a broad stroke here, the younger generations are trying to think about where they're going next, and what is what is their trajectory for moving up and doing things and building their career. Whereas somebody who's more seasoned or at the end of the career, or maybe, we have some part-time employees that are just doing this on the part-time. They may be just more worried about what's the remote policy, like I said.
More flexibility or stability even. Mm-hmm.
Right, exactly. And stability. Are we going to be, is this, what's it going to look like moving forward for me in my day-to-day type thing, but not necessarily how am I going to progress to the next level type questions.
Right.
So I think it's definitely generational and just individual as well.
Yep. No, that makes sense. So if I were to summarize everything that you've said, it's my key takeaways, at least, are change is very personal and unique experience, and that anticipating the questions that people might have based on their unique circumstances is important and valuable for someone who is leading themselves and others through a change. Clear communication, effective communication, thinking about what questions to ask, and having a clear vision throughout the process so people have something to anchor themselves to. Does that sound about right for all the takeaways for people who are in your shoes or who are supporting a change of this type, being an integration, a merger, or just some sort of internal restructuring?
Definitely. Yeah, I think that was an excellent summary of the main points there. And I think the one thing I would add is that it's a really, I guess, sensitive time. Right when everything's changing is where you need to be constantly checking in, constantly asking those questions, constantly trying to figure things out, because that's the time to shine. That's game time right there, to try to keep and retain employees and keep people motivated is right during that time. And it's hard because you're busy. There's a million tasks going on in combining two companies, with moving clients over and everything else, and getting adapted to new systems. But you can't lose sight of the big thing, which is your human capital, especially in a service-based business like ours. You can't lose sight of that, because that's obviously a huge piece of what allows us to deliver our services.
Absolutely. And people are an organization's greatest asset. So I completely agree with that statement. Thank you for being my first interview. I'm super proud of you. So I know that, having watched you go through this, how thoughtful and how much you cared about how your employees were experiencing this, and seeing you go through the ups and downs was learning for me as well, as someone who is very focused on helping others facilitate change within their organizations, within their teams, and within themselves. And I have no doubt people who are going to watch this video will get a lot out of the experience. But thank you, Trevor, for making time for me today. And thanks again. If people want to get connected with you, learn about this space, and just, I guess, mergers and acquisitions or legal stuff, they can go to, what's your website?
It's doidacrow.com, DOIDA crow.com. So it's just the name right there in the corner. And so you can go there, visit us. And you're active on LinkedIn as well. So Trevor Crow is on LinkedIn. And if you're interested in connecting with me and learning about Apogy and becoming a part of our community of change leaders and practitioners, check out www.apogy.biz, that's B-I-Z, or connect with me on LinkedIn and social. And I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Thanks again, Trevor. And we'll be back next month with more interviews and topics. So thanks again. Thanks for watching. Thank you.